Okay, you're now live. And telling your followers. Okay. Hey, Stephanie. Okay, did you see the notification to join? Hey, must be nice. Okay. I know it's a lot of headroom right here. So, okay. Let's do something with this thing right here. So, Stephanie, can you hear me? Oh boy, this thing. Can everybody hear me? Hello. Can anybody hear me? Sent you a request. Okay, great. Sure, bro. Hey.
Hi.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, so you're sideways.
Yeah, no, so I was logged in on the laptop, which I can do, but I can't make the request to join through the laptop.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had to switch real quick.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, got it.
Yep. All good, all good. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing good. Doing
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Hey,
Yeah, absolutely.
girl. Um, I was just on a call, not a call, a sort of a Zoom call, talking about some
Mm-hmm.
stuff with everything that's going on, and um, so everything that's going on with COVID and with the George Floyd death and everything, and
Yeah.
so it's a lot of webinars and teletown halls
Mm-hmm.
and Zoom meetings and Skypes and WebEx and here's one that my office hasn't transitioned over to, Microsoft
Teams.
Teams
Yeah.
meetings and stuff. And Aaron, it's a lot to adjust to, and I'm really glad that you could come on today to talk about everything HR. and
Yeah. And it's a lot right now.
yeah, matters. I mean, and with with the economy and jurisdictions beginning to open back up,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't know what it looks like, or
Yes.
and so, or how to even do it. So, or what measures to take and what to put in place. Hopefully, we are a little more informed, but I know that it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
So for those who are joining in, um, I'm Denise Smith, and every Tuesday night we do this IG Live, this Instagram Live conversation with a small business owner to talk about many different topics, topic areas that are hopefully helpful to entrepreneurs in either starting, running, growing their business. Right now, with the times that we're going through, I thought it would be a really good idea to talk to someone who specializes in human resources. And so today's guest is Stephanie Lomax, and she is owner, president, CEO, HR pro. So I'm
Yes.
just gonna let and she's all of that. And so why don't you start by just talking about who you are and what services your company provides.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and thanks for the opportunity as well. I think that this is a really, really important time in business in general, but particularly for small businesses. It's a really important yet uncharted time for small businesses. And so these are the times that I'm really excited that I went into business to help small businesses, because a lot of folks aren't looking out for the small people. So as you mentioned, I'm a CEO and HR strategist for HR Pro for You. We are an HR consulting firm that helps small businesses to embrace HR. And that embrace HR actually is a 7-step methodology that we take our clients through when we engage in consulting projects with them. And we've specialized in several areas: performance management, compliance in terms of HR, which is a lot of probably what we'll be talking about, or at least touching on during our talk this evening. Employee handbooks and policies, another one that's going to be really important for businesses now, probably, I'm going to say more than ever, but it's pretty
Even,
important.
yeah.
Yeah. Job description development. And then we also offer ancillary services. So we help with strategy as it relates to benefit strategy, recruiting strategy, although we're not a staffing firm. We don't do recruiting, but we do help them to develop their recruiting strategy. And we also help with, we do training as well. In-house training for employees so that their managers can be prepared. As you probably know, or most people know, your manager is usually the first person you go to when there's a problem. You don't go straight to HR necessarily, and you don't go straight to the president of a company either. You usually are going to talk to your manager. But managers often are unaware of the things to say or not to say as it relates to their employees and things that they may need or request. And so manager training is one of the things that we also focus on as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I guess I really don't even know where to begin when it comes to, who are your clients? Let's start there. Okay.
Sure.
Who are the businesses that you will help?
Yeah. So because we focus on small businesses, that is probably any business that has less than 200 employees. And I say that because even at 200, it's still considered a small business.
Which is
In
incredible.
terms of, it is, yes. Now, other agencies, state-based agencies like the SBA has a threshold in terms of revenue where it considers a business, small business, which is also very large. So that's the reason why that swing of up to about 200 employees is about the size companies that we serve. We're based here in the DC metropolitan area, but because 95% of our work is done virtually, we can support businesses and support businesses nationally that have either a presence in another state or are headquartered in another state. So we are able to assist businesses nationally. And then that client, the ideal client, is really someone that does not have in-house HR and needs to formalize or develop a foundation for they're either formalizing stuff they already have in place, they need someone that has the expertise to do that, or they're looking to develop a foundation as their business grows. So part of that embrace HR process is really helping them to create the foundation for their business to grow and scale from, so that as they start to, hire more employees and get larger, they're not backpedaling, trying to put things in place. They've already got things in place that they can build from. Many HR laws are based on size. So a company that has one employee doesn't have the same number of laws to follow as one that has 10 or 15 or 20 or 50. So at those individual breakpoints, there are different laws that have to be put into action and implemented and managed. So that's what we help them to do. And those are typically our ideal clients.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell me or give me an example of the different types of companies that you
Yeah.
work? Okay.
Yeah. So before going into business, as I call it in my previous life, Um, I was 17 years in corporate HR. The last half of it was spent in construction. And then my very first corporate client just happened to be a construction client. So I stayed in that lane there. But we also service professional service firms, so law firms, accounting firms, and we also partner with them as strategic partners because specifically for small businesses, we often share the same client base. So I have strategic partners that are professional services firms, but then I also have clients that are. And then our other largest segment is federal government contractors, helping them with compliance because they have a little bit of a different situation when it comes to compliance when you start talking about handling federal government contracts. So.
And do you work with product-based companies or?
I have.
Yeah.
Very
Or
interesting.
in the food industry, you know.
Yes. So I've had clients that were restaurants, hair salons, nonprofit also. I have a large retail client as well, personal services client. So yeah, so the thing about HR that I love, and most people is the reason why they run, is because HR from a federal standpoint, for the most part, is HR no matter what industry you're in.
Okay.
So Title VII is Title VII. It doesn't matter if you're a restaurant or a construction company or a nonprofit agency. The Americans with Disability Act, or the ADA, is the ADA law. When you get to 10 people, you're required to follow it. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. So a lot of that's what makes us that's what makes us diverse in terms of an HR firm, is that we're able to service clients across industries, simply because HR federal law is HR federal law. Having said that, however, there are state laws that are also required to be followed, and there are even down to like county or jurisdiction laws that have been put into place. Things like here in the DC metropolitan area, Montgomery County-based businesses have a specific leave law that went into effect before the state of Maryland leave law did. And so now there's both in place. So if you're a Montgomery County-based business, you have to follow the one that is most generous to the employee. Okay. So those are the kinds of things that we walk clients through, really consulting them through those, understanding the need to have, number one, an expert that can really help them through it, but then also just understanding the need of how to implement it in their business.
Okay. And so are you also working with companies that are, let's just say it might be, so just for example, I'm a photographer, but I work with government contractors and construction companies, construction photography, right? But if there's some work that I need done that I might want to subcontract out myself. So do you work with one, those one person?
The solopreneurs?
Yeah. That
Yeah.
help them, but even though they still need a team around them, but
sure.
They're 2 employees, they're 1099s.
Right.
Do you help people build teams?
So part of the main part where I really dig in is making sure that they understand the difference between what really is a 1099 and what really is a W-2 employee.
Okay.
Because a lot of us, and I put myself in that bucket as well, when we start building our business, it's our business, right? To let somebody else in and have to hire them and let them touch our stuff. No, I think I just want to hire a contractor. Well, that's fine, but they might not really be a contractor depending upon how you're treating them. Okay. So I help them to determine that. In terms of building the team, I will help them to kind of identify where some of their needs are and help them with identifying a recruiting strategy. But I do have a strategic partner that specifically helps small businesses to scale. Okay. So she dives in way deeper than I'm definitely a 2 in the building part. I'm definitely more on the recruiting strategy part and really the overall HR strategy. But I partner with some pretty amazing if I do say so myself, I think they're great,
Mm-hmm.
partners that specialize in those particular areas, where we can have a handoff, and then we can work, side by side with the client to really
Okay.
help them get what it is that they need in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what when a person or when someone is just jumping out there and starting a business, what do they need to be thinking about um,
Yeah.
in the beginning? Starting out.
Yeah. The first thing that they need to be aware of is, when they begin to hire, there's about 12 federal laws that they will need to be aware of and follow.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. So you can't be willy-nilly about just bringing people in because there are federal HR laws in place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I always say that you really need to think about the end, start with the end in mind. So what do you want it to look like? Kind of backtrack into what we need to get there. So if you're at point A right now and it really is just you and you need, systems in place, for example. So like HR systems to help you do some things, or accounting systems to help you do some things to automate so that you aren't the one that's sitting there doing every single solitary thing. That's something that I can assist with in terms of like HR systems and like ancillary technical projects or systems.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you start to get to capacity,
Okay.
you're working above 80% capacity and it's all you,
Mm-hmm.
you definitely need to look at bringing in a part-time person,
Mm-hmm.
or a 1099 that you can give certain projects to, but we need to make sure that we really are going to treat them like a 1099.
Okay.
So those are the things that they need to be thinking about in the beginning is, where am I going to need the most help immediately, and where can I find that person?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times small businesses shy away from using interns, for example. They need the credits and they need the work experience, and they do really amazing jobs. So that's a great place to start, if you need to find someone to kind of help fill in the gap. And not just in the summer. Like there are
Yeah.
people can do internships all year long. So
Yeah.
that's a great place to start when you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out, what you really need.
Mm-hmm.
I read the book, and people, and I listened to the audio. People probably know about it. The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that he talks about, is write a job description for every position that you think you're going to need in your business.
Okay.
Start with the CEO. What does the CEO do? What's the CFO do? What does the technology director do? Whatever you're going to call them. Write out those job descriptions. And at the beginning, you are all those people.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
as you start to grow your business and you really start to shift your mindset from being the technician, the doer,
Yep.
to being the
Oh,
entrepreneur,
yep.
correct, it's a
Mm-hmm.
different mindset. And
Yeah.
so many businesses also go into business, or many people rather go into business with a technician mindset. I
Right.
did it. I had an entrepreneurial
No.
Caesar. Oh, yeah. He calls it an entrepreneurial seizure, where you're
Mm-hmm.
like sitting at your computer desk and you're like, I could do this for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go do it for yourself, but you forgot that running a business requires marketing and accounting and
Mm-hmm.
technology and all those things that you do not know how to do.
Yeah.
So write out the job descriptions for each of the positions, assign them to yourself, sign them yourself. And then as you start to grow, find where those people can start to fill in the gaps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about what's happening now. Okay.
Okay.
It, it's a tough time. It
Yep.
is a tough time out here, and it is and oftentimes it looks bleak. And I
Mm-hmm.
a friend of mine, and I think you know her, Tammy Mullen. I saw
Yes.
a post
Yes.
on her Instagram that said 45% of
Mm-hmm.
small businesses are not going to reopen.
Yeah.
A scary number. And
Mm-hmm.
the majority of those companies are going to be black owned.
Correct.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a huge disparity, and it's tough. So
Yeah.
I hope that, you know, we are starting to support, you know, Black owned businesses and, you know, because, you know, we need funding to be able to stay in,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
But COVID-19 has forced a lot of people to close their doors, and you work with a lot of those companies, right?
So I will tell you, I have been supremely blessed that the businesses that I have been supporting, while they've been impacted by COVID-19, have not had to close their doors.
Okay.
So I'm very blessed to say that, because I know that's not the case for a lot of businesses. However, where they're struggling, and in the beginning, it really was, what are we supposed to do? You know, I mean, I've got construction companies. Now, they managed, because they were considered essential, they didn't close. They were still working, but they had to work remotely. And so how do you transition and manage a team that's 100% remote for the most part, when it's been like, we need to be in the office and we don't really work remotely, you know, or we do, if we do, it's kind of like on a sporadic basis, like we don't have a remote working flex schedule kind of situation. So a lot of businesses were in that scenario. But then I did have some businesses that had to close temporarily because of, you know, state stay-at-home orders, and because we just couldn't get our hands around what this virus was going to do. And so what I helped a lot of them with doing was managing through the PPP loan, not managing the loan process, but managing from an employee side of what needs to happen in terms of making sure we keep staff levels relatively the same by, I think the deadline is June 30th, in order for that PPP loan to be forgiven completely. So how to manage, you know, employees, what happens when you start reopening at all. What happens when you have a confirmed case of somebody that contracts the virus and you've got to close down your business, you know, for 24 hours to decontaminate? What happens when people have been quasi exposed? You know, they live with somebody, or they saw somebody, they were in contact with them, found out that the person they were in contact with got it. What are they supposed to do? What do we do about leave laws? You know, the federal government passed this new leave law. How do we manage that? So those are the things that I've really been, over the last, God, has it been 12 weeks? It feels like an eternity. But that's what I've been managing and helping them to kind of manage through. That's those kinds of questions, you know, the what do we do situation, or what if this happens scenarios as it relates to, you know, bringing people back and just keeping a safe workspace for people to feel comfortable coming back. So that's really what I've been managing and help consulting the businesses through.
Okay, so what does that look like?
Every day is different.
So give me an example of what has to take place now, because you just said there are some laws, you know, and it's going to impact people where they have to, if someone contracts COVID-19, and close their doors for 24 hours. Okay. So you know, so what does that look like?
So I think that, as crazy as it sounds, a person contracting COVID actually is the more black and white scenario. I think we're really clear. If somebody contracts the disease, we know exactly what the protocols are to make sure that our workspaces are safe. We have those protocols in place. The really gray areas are, what happens when you start bringing people back to work and childcare is not open yet?
Oh yes, that's my problem.
That's a real thing for people, you know. And what if it's a two-parent, you know, home where both parents are working? What happens when you start trying to bring people back? Because childcare is definitely not in schools as well. Thankfully, we're in summer, but still, they would typically be going to camp.
Summer camps.
Yeah.
You know,
So
and quite frankly, I don't want to send my child to a summer camp.
yeah, I
Right.
don't think I really want to do that either, you know. So I think that's the really hard part, is that one. And then just how to fold people back in. So for example, one of the exercises I walked through with one of my clients today, was putting together like a schedule, like a matrix, that says, okay, this person's going to come in this day or on these days, and these people are going to come in on these days. But we have to kind of look at it on a fluid basis, because based on what type of work situations arise, we might have to make some adjustments to those days.
Okay.
But we are trying to stay below whatever the capacity is that the state government has put in place. So if it's 25% capacity, 50% capacity, the office on those days has to be less than that, to give us the flexibility in case somebody does have to come in that was on an unscheduled day, you know. So we're walking through those kinds of scenarios and talking through that. Are we going to require people to wear masks every day when they're in office? Some people are like, I'm not really trying to wear a mask. Some people are like, I have a health condition where I can't wear a mask all the time. What do you do about that?
Yeah.
So these are the things that I'm walking through on a regular basis with clients.
Yeah, because you know, I have I've been to some restaurants for to-go orders, and sometimes they're wearing a mask. It seems like they're starting to relax a little bit, and so driving up, I was like, "Where your mask at?" You know, you know,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that, you know.
yeah.
So I mean, but
So the tricky part with businesses, particularly, I'm not as I mean, I know that the restaurant industry and personal service industries are governed by the Board of Health and all that. So there's a whole another set of rules that they're required to follow, right? But like corporate businesses, one of the things that they really need to be aware of, and I'm sure the other industries do as well, is, you know, a person that comes in that doesn't want to follow the protocols that have been set forth creates an unsafe work environment for everybody else. So now we're talking about OSHA violations. And God knows you do not want DOL OSHA coming knocking on the door. That is not a problem that you want to have. So as much as you can do to show that you're trying to mitigate the risk, the better. So a person can't say, well, we don't have a wear your mask policy. Okay. You know, and I had a really interesting conversation with somebody the other day too, just saying, you know, well, the masks are kind of, is perception is reality. So does the mask really help or does it not really help? Do the gloves really help or they don't really help? So it's all of those kind of things that are floating out there. No. Do we have the scientific data to back up that masks actually prevent the spreading? Maybe not, but we know social distancing does. Right. So, you know what I mean? So you've got to factor all those things into it without being insensitive, but then also trying to run a business to be operable and, you know, generate revenue so you can pay people.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I saw another, I'm on Instagram a lot, and I saw actually the woman who I like to get my headshots done from, even though Jackie Hicks. I saw on one of her posts where they announced that they will reopen, and they showed us how they're spraying all of these chemicals in all the areas to sanitize everything, and they do it after each client. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. But I'm not sure how many businesses are doing that, because, you know, we in the U.S., my husband and I, we were watching a video of some documentary of how they're doing it in China. Okay. And every movie in a movie theater, right? They in their space suits.
That's right. The hazmat suit.
Yeah, and they're spraying every row, every seat. That's a lot of work, but yeah, you give them a raise because that's a lot of work. Give you a raise, but you know, they're and every child that was going into daycare, they are spraying them down. I was like, oh,
Yep.
don't be sure
Yep.
this is safe.
I've seen that. I've seen that where
You know,
they do the
but
temperatures, wash their hands, spray their shoes, do all
yes,
that stuff. Yeah.
are we willing to do that here?
Who knows?
you
Who
know,
knows?
you know,
Yeah.
because I think I would feel a little more comfortable. You spray my child down as much as you want, as long as
Mm-hmm.
it's safe now.
Right.
But
Right.
and I need proof that it's safe.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
but that would make me feel a little more comfortable if I knew that it
Sure.
was done every day.
Yeah. And I think that's part of what businesses need to understand.
Mhm.
From, you're not trying to make it a cost prohibitive type of process, but again, you want to show that you're doing your due diligence to make sure that I had that same pillow, by the way.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Mhm.
But you want to you want to give your employees a sense that you're doing everything that you possibly can, that is reasonable,
Mhm.
to make them feel comfortable
Mhm.
coming back into work, because we do have to at some point
Yes.
before a vaccine comes. If we decide we're going to stay home till a vaccine comes, then we might as well just
Right.
close it all.
Now,
So.
I think it's Jax Michaels. I would
Oh,
Jax
yeah,
Michaels.
I see that.
He
Uh-huh.
said not many are going to do it due to budgetary restraints. Is there assistance for implementing?
That's a good question. That's a good question. So I think that there's definitely options out there
Mhm.
for businesses to use to start to think about, how they want to implement it. There's products that are out there. Oh, he says it's Jackson.
Jax-
Yeah. Oh, this is Aggie. This is one of my Aggies. Yeah. um, but yeah, there's definitely there's resources that are out there. Now, is there funding available? I'm not really sure about that. That's not really my piece. So I don't really know, but I would imagine they have to have something in place.
Yeah.
And if they don't, that they probably will start to think about what kinds of things can they put in place for businesses to make sure they have the resources to clean and contaminate, decontaminate rather.
What? I don't know his number. Girl, I can't get.
I have two. I
Yeah.
have two. So I understand. Trust me.
We interrupted
Yeah,
here.
that's okay. Trust me.
I don't know it. Wait till I'm done. Okay. Um, yeah. So I would, if they're gonna put a PPP, paycheck protection program in place, and maybe that's what it's for, partially.
Yeah, so I think the initial criteria was that they needed to have, it was for payroll related expenses.
Mhm.
So not just salaries, but like benefits, insurance, 401k contributions,
Right.
those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And then rent and utility expenses, or mortgage and utility expenses.
Mhm.
But there were grants that were available through the state, and I don't know that they had the same stipulations. And there were also other loans through the state
Yeah.
that they could use to do those things. But I think, the first thing that people were thinking about is what am I going to do to keep my business in play
Yeah.
while we're at home?
Yeah.
I think the second phase is, okay, now we're bringing people back to work. What kind of things do I need to have in place to keep them safe? PPE is a big thing. The
Yeah.
mask, the glove, the hand sanitizer that I don't know if you can still buy in the stores at this point.
But I know that they did have a grant. I believe it was a grant program for companies who could manufacture mass amounts.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, of PPE equipment and all that. But I think that they need to. I think they need to. They need to really relook at this because, especially for smaller companies, I know
Sure.
that PP program. A lot of people were angry at some of the larger size companies that are considered small.
Yeah.
Who got
Especially under this one. This was up to
relief.
500 employees. That's a lot.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think that it would be worth exploring whether or not they can assist in that area, because okay,
Yeah.
now you've given us this money for us to be able to pay our mortgage and to be able to keep these employees that you required me to make
Yeah.
sustain, which we don't want people to lose their jobs, okay, but now
Right.
we've done
Right.
it. Now we need a little bit more assistance, especially for the smaller companies,
Sure. Sure.
because I don't consider a company who's 200 or more small. I just, me personally,
Yeah.
and I know that SBA is their standard is different. Taylor, get out of here. I know that their standard is different, but I think in a situation, in this type of situation, they need to really focus on the smaller companies. And I think that and
Yeah.
I the 10 to 20
So
employees.
like your micro employers.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I think that they are the ones that are going to need the most assistance.
Yeah, they're definitely going to need support. And
Mhm.
I agree. So Jackson was just saying in the chat, he says, um, he doesn't think that they were thinking about that initially. So I think they were
Right.
initially like, oh my God, what do we need to do to keep these businesses in business?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it'll be phases. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to come up with some other types of ways
Right.
to provide PPE
Yeah.
assistance for definitely the micro businesses.
Yeah.
For sure. So those that are less than 30, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he said that he thinks that something like that will be in the next round of funding, since much of those funds will target hospitals and infrastructure.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
and let's hope so.
Yes, yes,
Let's hope.
yes.
But yet and still, but I think what's going to end up happening though is, if there's going to be any type of assistance that needs to be in place, is going to have to come from the more localized jurisdiction, like the county.
Probably so.
Yeah.
Probably so. That's why it's so super important. I hope people voted.
I know. I know. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
our deadline was
I,
last Tuesday, but
I know that for Prince George's County, there is oh, look, he got an inside source. He need to join in on
okay.
the
Come
discussion.
on, Aggie. Come through, Aggie. Oh, he says in Congress. Okay.
Okay, well that's good. No, good to know. But I think that because I believe that with Prince George's County, I'm not even for certain that they've stopped accepting applications for their funding. I'm not sure if they've capacity or not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But let's what are some of the other challenges that we look at specifically when we're preparing to reopen? I mean,
Yeah.
and what are the policies that need to be in place?
Yes, let's talk about that. That's my favorite part right there. You just hit my jam.
All right.
I'm going to hit my mojo now for real. No. So the biggest thing is making sure that we've got the handbook updated. And the main things that we want to look at, or that businesses want to take a look at, is making sure they include the paid leave policies under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or the FFCRA. Two different, I know that I was like, could you come up with like a 3-letter acronym, not a 5 one? But no, this is what we're working with here. So under the FFCRA, there are 2 federally funded paid leaves, which has never happened before. This is unprecedented, as is all of this, right?
Okay. Right.
The federal government has provided leave laws, but they were not mandated paid leave laws. States usually then took it a step further to do paid leave laws. Okay. So under the FFCRA, there's 2. The first is the emergency sick paid leave, which allows employees to take up to 80 hours of paid leave for specific criteria. To take care of a loved one that has COVID, if you have been diagnosed yourself, if you have to self-quarantine, and you're not able to work remotely. Okay. That is the caveat on this. Okay. The second part is the expanded Family Medical Leave Act. So Family Medical Leave has been around since 1986, I believe, but it's always been unpaid. now employees get an additional 10 weeks of paid leave
Okay.
if they're taking care of a loved one, not able to work remote, taking care of their own serious health condition, have been quarantined by state official, or they have a child who's under 18, who cannot go to daycare because their daycare has been impacted by COVID-19. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
Who's gonna pay for all of that leave?
yeah, so that's a federal paid leave, and the businesses
Okay.
are having to pay for it. Yeah.
So the businesses have to pay for it, but
Yeah.
the federal government is mandating.
Is funding it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they provided
They're
this.
funding it. So they're giving it to the businesses.
So all of this some of these funds would be considered under PPP.
Okay.
So because it's payroll expense. So you're allowed to, and the thing is that these are all their situations if they're not able to telework. Mm-hmm. If they're able to telework, then they would not necessarily qualify. If you can make it so that they are able to work remotely during this time, either the first 80 hours or the last 10 weeks, mm-hmm. Then you wouldn't have to, then you wouldn't have to worry about paying them a leave without them working. Okay. You just have them on payroll like normal.
Okay. Okay.
So those are the two big policies that need to be added in there. Okay. And both of these are supposed to sunset December 31st of this year. Okay. I'm not so sure that that's actually going to happen. Okay. But we'll see what happens, mm-hmm. With the economy and how things, what happens when stuff starts to reopen. Mm-hmm. And they, we have to deal with flu season coming up and exposure and all those other things they keep talking about. So we'll see what happens if they end up expanding it or extending it or they modify it in some kind of way. Who knows? The second thing we have to think about is, are we going to have a temperature check policy? Mm-hmm. Are we going to revise or create a formal now remote work policy? Because employees are going to say, well, we've proven that we can work remotely, so why can't we have a remote policy? So that's a policy. Yeah. And then just your general return to work guidelines and protocols, here's what will happen when you come into work. You'll have your temperature checked, you'll sign in, you'll wear your mask. Well, what are those guidelines and protocols going to look like?
Step into this suit.
Exactly.
This space suit.
Exactly. Exactly. So
and work like this all day.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So those are the main policies. Okay. And then you have to also look at how those federal paid leave policies are going to interact or intersect with your already in place paid leave mm-hmm. policies. Mm-hmm. Because companies have PTO and sick leave already in place. So how do they connect or how do they intersect and how are you going to manage that? Mm-hmm. Those are probably the main policies that we are talking with businesses about putting into their handbook and also implementing.
And how about, but what about social distancing?
Yeah. So that's part of those guidelines. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we want to call it like a policy or like a work rule. Yeah. So, because social distancing might not be around forever, ever. Right? That might not be a thing anymore, but it could be. I mean, you could put a social distancing policy in your handbook. There would be nothing wrong with it. Mm-hmm. But it could also be part of your guidelines and protocols as well.
Because how are retail stores going to implement this? Are we forever going to have these lines on the floors that are? Yeah. I went to the UPS store and they had blue tape. Yep. With a specific I would guess it was 6 feet apart and people mm-hmm. weren't necessarily
abiding by that.
Some of them were too much. The person that they went over the line and gave them even more space than what was required, and I was like, mm-hmm. I need you to move up so I can feel like we didn't yeah know, right yeah and but are we gonna have to do that forever? It is uncomfortable wearing a mask in the heat and and as one person is walking out the door, another person is walking in, and then you 6 feet.
It's going to be, I think at some point, until we get the vaccines and who knows when that's going to be, it's going to be some weird changes that we're all going to have to manage through, you know. In terms of other like policies and compliance, and I can't stress OSHA enough, you know, do the due diligence as a small business to make sure that.
Talk about what they are.
So the whole safe work environment piece.
Okay.
So are you doing all of the things that are reasonable to make a person feel comfortable and safe at work? And those are those things we talked about: hand sanitizer stations, wipes, wiping down surfaces at the end of every day, not using common areas in break rooms. You know,
how effective is that? You know,
keeping people out of congregating, I think, is really what we're trying to do. So
exactly. You know, I mean,
yeah.
but like, how effective is that? Because if I'm going into a fast food restaurant, and I know I keep talking about this, but if I'm going into a fast food restaurant and I'm coming and I'm placing my order, I got my mask on, and the person I'm talking to has their mask on, but I done touched all over the counter, that they don't know what I have.
Sure.
Are you wiping the counter after every customer?
Yeah.
No.
So I think restaurants are probably going to be a little different than like our corporate environments, because they've got the whole Board of Health thing. We were kind of talking about that a little earlier. So they definitely have some extra protocols that they're probably going to have to follow. And they may, in dining rooms, like in dining, may stay closed way longer. It may be more drive-through and curbside pickup for a way longer time than businesses, like corporate businesses, going back into the workplace.
Okay.
Because you can't, it's very hard to control traffic coming through like that.
And I mean, like when I have to go back to, because I work at the courthouse, and if I have to go, I don't want to go to the public bathrooms. I don't want to go. I don't even want to congregate with the people anymore. And I work with these people I used to work with every day. You know, I don't want to gather in the break room.
I'm a hugger, so I have a really hard time with this. You know, and I see people, I'm like, oh God, I can't tell. You know, it's very weird.
Yes.
So but yeah, I think like those restaurants, hotels, those kind of places are probably going to be a little longer opening. And if they do open, or when they do open, their protocols are probably going to be way higher than having like businesses, you know, working in a corporate office where you can separate people 6 feet and they can work there, and you don't have to go in a break room to get coffee or heat up your lunch, you know. So it'll be a little different for corporate businesses, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really quickly, I wanted to ask you something about building a team, right?
Yeah.
So let's just say I wanted to open up a health spa. Karen. How do you begin to what is it that you start to think about in terms of hiring people for, you know, a place like that?
So I'm going to say there's a general rule that I follow when you get ready to hire anyone, and this is part of the recruiting strategy that I walk my clients through. The first thing you need to do is, outside of knowing kind of the positions that you need to have filled, I mean, that's kind of like the obvious piece, right? I need to have a front desk receptionist. I need to have a therapist. I need to have maybe a business manager to handle the back office, billing, this, that, and the other. When you start talking about hiring people into your baby, because that's what it is, please think really clearly about the values and the character that you want people to have. I talk to businesses all the time about, you know, even down to their handbook. When you start talking about building, you know, putting together your handbook, think about including your company or core values. What are they? And talk about those core values at every single stage of the recruiting process. Have it on the job description, have it on the job posting, talk about it when they come in for their interview. Ask them ways that they've demonstrated these core values. When you get to the point where you're going to start evaluating them, have that be part of their performance evaluation. How well do they carry out the core values of the business? Because anybody can go get a job as a therapist or a front desk receptionist. You can do that anywhere. Well, I mean, typically outside of these kind of situations, but you can go get a job anywhere, right? but you want to work, don't you want people working for you that care about the same things that you care about, or at least to some level, you know, or that are invested in your vision because they have the same types of values, they have integrity, or they're ethical, or they're accountable, or whatever your core values are. Make sure that you're recruiting people and you're speaking to that, speak life to that in every stage of the process. Okay. Because that will help to weed out. You're basically vetting people,
right?
You know,
right.
To come into your business. And so, building a team, a part of it, small but has a large impact, is really identifying people that share the same values that you do.
Right.
So that, I would say, that's where you want to start. Outside of the obvious, I need a receptionist, which has probably the highest turnover in any corporate office, and probably the hardest position to fill, is the front desk receptionist. Okay. They're hard.
Okay.
Yeah. So think about, you find the character. You can teach skills. You cannot teach character. You cannot teach values. So look for those when you're talking about recruiting. Okay. Yeah.
And when I open up a business, what are the top 5 things that I need to have in place for my employees?
Yeah. No. A handbook. A legally compliant job description. A development plan or a performance management plan. It doesn't have to be super formal, but you want to have a way that you're able to document employees' performance, growth, areas of improvement that need to happen. And it needs to be done more than just on an annual basis. So whatever you're putting together for those employees, make sure that you have touch points that are more than just annually. It's way easier to do when you're smaller, but once you kind of develop that process, as you get larger, it becomes part of the overall process. So it'll be way easier to do. And it becomes part of the culture. So what did I say? Policy, a handbook, a job description, a performance management plan. I would also say kind of an overall recruiting strategy, which is going to be more in line with your business plan or your growth strategy. So they will kind of go hand in hand. And then what would I say is the 5th thing? A rewards and recognition program.
Oh, yes.
And that doesn't necessarily mean money all the time. You got to know your employees and what motivates them. Is it something that's intrinsic or extrinsic? And so, you got to know your employees. And so the rewards and recognition program is definitely something I would say you should be thinking through as you hire your first employees.
Okay.
Yep.
I know that, the culture of your business is just so important. And I only have like a couple of minutes, I think, left before IG Live is going to cut me off.
Okay.
But how do you establish your culture for your business?
Ooh, yeah.
Does that go into where you were talking about your vision and
your core values? All of that starts a culture. Okay. All of that starts a culture. The culture, you are the business. It, as my strategic business advisor reminds us all the time, the growth and the success of the business rises and falls on you. So you've got to set the example. You set the bar. For what you want the culture of your organization to be. For those that are joining that didn't get a chance to hear any of these things too, I just want to say this before I forget. I'm going to put it in the chat.
Yes.
If you email me at embracehr@HRPro, I'm typing it while I'm saying it, hrproforyou.com. I have a checklist that you can download. It's a free checklist you can download to get access to some of the stuff we were talking about in regards to reopening. So what are the things for small businesses? It's kind of like a COVID HR checklist for you to be able to look through as businesses start to think about reopening and bringing employees back in there. So it's free, my gift.
Yeah, and this, I love this conversation. I don't have long, but I love this conversation because, I am a firm believer, and I believe everybody should know it if they don't. But, one of the reasons that you go into entrepreneurship is job creation also. It's not all about you. You're supposed to be just finding something that something that you need, and then you fulfill a need, right?
That's right. That's right. Yep.
And then you bring some people with you along the way.
That's
right?
correct.
So your people make your company.
That's right. They're your most valuable asset.
Yes, and I've worked in situations. Taylor, get that off the speaker, please. I've worked in situations where bad bosses. I've experienced that in my last job, and
I think we all have. Yes, we all have. I've been there
too. Your company is going. Your level of customer service is going to be reflected in how you treat your employees.
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Services I would think is the utmost important for your business. So
Yep. Absolutely.
So I think this was so important, and I really thank you for coming on today.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was glad to join.
And everyone here, if you have any time on every Tuesday, I'm here every Tuesday with a new business, with a different business owner talking about ways you can make money or ways you can grow your business. So please make sure you follow me and follow HR Pro for you. And hopefully, you've found this conversation valuable. And thank
I hope so as well.
For joining in on the conversation.
Yes, Jackson. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much, Denise.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you. And I'll be talking to you anyway.
Okay. That sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Bye,
Good night, everybody. Good night. Thanks for joining and tuning in.
Take care.
All right. You too. Oh, wow. Okay. That was a great conversation. Good night, everybody. Good night.